Welcome to Uncaged. Today we're speaking with Josiah Whitman. Anyone that is out there trying to figure out where they're going in their lives, I think is going to appreciate this discussion. Josiah Whitman is the CEO of Whitman Partners. He is managing a portfolio of candidates and searches. He is a recruitment guru, a leadership guru. And so we're going to be talking to him really about what's happening in that lovely world of executive search and broadly all search, and then also looking at how the leadership space is sorting itself out as we move forward. So, Josiah, it's great to have you on the show. Let's start out, though, as if I was recruiting you. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your career.
Sure. Happy to, man. I think I'm the only person that you'll ever meet that was destined to be a recruiter. You don't hear that very frequently. A lot of people seem to sort of fall into it. I have always been a recruiter. The origin story is I went to high school in Oregon and out to college in Colorado, where I had an ambitious streak, and I thought that I was going to return to Oregon post college and set the business world on fire.
Mhm.
And I came back to Portland, Oregon, and I couldn't get a job, and I couldn't even get interviews at the time. And so I went to my local temp agency and I said, I'll do anything, I'll type. And they placed me out at Intel Corporation as basically a typist, and I loved
Mhm.
it. Spent a wonderful year there. Went back to the temp agency a year later, and they placed me at a company called InFocus Systems, basically typing still, maybe a little bit, couple extra bucks an hour.
Right.
Had a great year. Went back a third time, and I think they got the hint. They said, would you like to be on this side of the desk and be a recruiter? And that launched my career as a recruiter working at a temp agency. And I have loved it ever since. I spent 3 years at a company called Robert Half International, then spent 3 years learning to do headhunting, cold calling people at their desk. And then those 6 years of training was the training that I needed to start Whitman Partners.
Now, I mean, Whitman Partners been going for almost 18 years, really. It's a very successful recruiter. I'm excited to hear how you guys have evolved as a business and really what you're focused on now. So tell me a little bit about the business.
Sure, happy to. So the name Partners of Whitman Partners was our better mousetrap. Our better mousetrap was to hire top producers and to flip the commission splits on their head and to offer strong commission splits to recruiters, and hopefully they would stay for a long time. And also to give them equity early and often. That's the term partners. You make partner at Whitman Partners. And so that's what we have achieved, is have long tenures with my team. Now, when we started in 2005, we were like every other recruitment organization with what are called desks: a
Mm.
finance desk, a healthcare desk, an accounting desk. And it was in 2008, 2009 that we had to consolidate. By any chance, do you remember what was going on in 2008, 2009?
I don't want to remember that. I don't want to remember that moment.
Most recruiters had to close up shop because no
Yeah.
one was hiring. No one was certainly paying fees. We consolidated in healthcare. And when we were all consolidated in healthcare, we were able to see the hospital system and how it works.
Hmm.
And we saw that it was the operating room that was the revenue driver for hospitals, for healthcare almost in general. When the director of surgical services, the woman or man that runs the operating room for a hospital, quits or is fired, the CEO would race to replace her. And so that was when we became single specialty. And that's still
Right.
our niche today. We are single specialty for the director of surgical services.
Wow.
And so if a hospital in Portland, Maine needs a director of surgical services, we're right there, just like we would if a hospital in Portland, Oregon. So we're very much a national company filling that role.
Yeah, and clearly that is an absolutely critical role to make sure that it gets covered quickly. Have you noticed? It's funny because I feel like we all went through that phase during COVID where we all learned more about medicine than we ever thought we were going to learn or have to learn in our lives. And now we have essentially a medical system that is evolving, but essentially kind of trying to get going again, still going through some big challenges on the consolidation front, et cetera. But what are some of the big trends you're seeing right now as you're recruiting in this space?
Right, you're absolutely right. We were all sort of armchair clinicians
Yeah,
about viruses and vaccines.
yeah,
Well, I saw it a lot from how hospital CEOs were attacking the problem and dealing with it from a staffing and recruiting issue. So what we saw was obviously ambulatory surgery centers shut down in what was it, 2020 or 2021,
yeah,
and so all those surgical services cases, our rotator cuff, our knee scoped, they shut down. We couldn't get those surgeries performed. And so those cases stacked on top of each other. Meanwhile, we've got burnout and the great resignation occurring. And so when they lifted the surgical services ban, ambulatory surgery ban, all those cases were stacked on top of each other. So we had this boom, this rush to get these cases onto the block. And that resulted in hospital CEOs having to pay what are called travelers to
mm,
come and staff their operating rooms. That was
yeah,
a real burden on the hospital finances, and that's what's working its way through the system right now. Is all these hospital CEOs are trying to reduce their usage of travelers, and that directly impacts Whitman Partners because we place interims. That's our term for
yeah.
travelers. They're leaders. They're not the actual OR nurse per se. They're the leader over the OR nurses. But at a certain point, they look a lot like a traveler in the sense that they're not a full-time employee of the hospital. So that's what we're working through right now is the challenge associated with hospital finances. And my heart goes out to these CEOs. They are
Yeah.
pressured in so many different ways by this by the post-pandemic financials.
Yeah, I was speaking to an individual who was leading nursing at a hospital in New York City, and they were really concerned not only just getting talent, but to look at who was coming up through the system, like through the educational process and system. And it seems like this shortage is going to continue a bit. Is that kind of what you're seeing as well, or?
Well, how about the macro trend of baby boomers retiring?
Yeah,
The shortage is not something that is going away, and it's not even pandemic, although it's certainly acute because of the pandemic. It's also because of the baby boomers retiring. And interesting anecdote: Palomar Health, a hospital system in San Diego, based out of San Diego, is now offering $100,000 signing bonuses to new employees joining their operating room, new nurses, OR nurses.
wow.
That's how they are attacking that problem. And so we're seeing lots of creative ways that CEOs are attacking this problem and new challenges for leadership.
Well, I know things are looking up in the nursing space in general, as there was a young woman who lives in my building here in Miami, and she was getting out of kind of like one of the nicest cars I'd ever seen. Very, I mean, a luxury car, and I was chatting with her in the elevator, and it came out that she was a nurse, and I was like, wow, that's a good. This is maybe I need to go into nursing.
Good
This is
time.
yeah, it's a good time. Well, listen, I mean, it sounds to me that recruiting is in your blood. Clearly, you were meant to do this, Josiah. I mean, 17, almost 18 years doing Whitman Partners, and clearly almost doing it right out of college. Tell me a little bit about what drives that passion for this space.
Well, so our demographic is a 52-year-old woman, and she has a master's degree. She has traded her scrubs in for a business suit as she now runs budgets, both capital and operational budgets. And that's not exactly my tennis or my pickleball doubles partner, right?
Right.
But it happens to be that it becomes a labor of love very quickly. And the way that we see it is the director of surgical services. 70% of hospital revenues run through her department. She has
Hmm.
hundreds of direct reports, but the stakeholders that can frankly get her fired, the hospital CEO, he makes $1 million a year. The orthopedic surgeon makes $1 million a year. Plenty of people to advocate for them. It's where Whitman Partners comes in, that we advocate for the director of surgical services that really drives us. And that's our term,
Yeah.
that's our purpose. We give directors of surgical services the celebrity treatment. So that's what I get up in the morning to do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. I love the way you describe it, basically being almost like the integrating point throughout the hospital, really of all the levels. And what a challenging role, right? I mean, you're managing up, you're managing down, you're managing sideways. So clearly, the people that go into that space probably should be leading our country
That's
at
right.
this point.
We didn't even talk about labor issues like the unions, and of course that's been big with SAG and AFTRA and the auto workers unions as well.
Mhm.
The unions in healthcare are also big factors that make the director of surgical services job very challenging, and we
Hmm.
understand.
Wow, that's big. Well, Josiah, speaking of challenging, here we are in 2024. I would say that people seem to be excited again about this year, but it's also a year where there's winds of change afoot. And I know that the things that are happening in the capital markets impact every industry, things like interest rates
Yeah.
and how things are evolving. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in 2024 in your space.
100%, 50% of directors of surgical services relocate for their job, right? That's challenging when you're trying to get someone to relocate from Minneapolis to even Milwaukee. Otherwise,
Hmm.
a reasonable relocation, if they have a 3% mortgage, they're not relocating for a 7% mortgage. That's a big factor,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So we're looking at the capital markets just very closely, as are so many other people. It's definitely a factor for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. Those things will hopefully evolve and get a little bit better for us as the year progresses. But Josiah, I mean, it's a really interesting time, and clearly, I think one of the takeaways here is anyone who's interested in a great future, maybe consider surgical services and perioperative leadership.
Yeah.
Might be a good career path for folks here. Josiah, if someone wanted to reach you and learn a little bit more about Whitman Partners and what you're doing, where's the best place to find you?
LinkedIn is obviously the domain of recruiters, and I'm pretty active. I'm communicating on LinkedIn, and I get inbound every day from LinkedIn, so that's a good one. Twitter, same. I am also I'm pretty prolific on X, right? And even some of the my demo, we like Facebook too, so
Hmm.
you can find us on socials.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that if you wanted to see kind of how we're looking at the world and how we're communicating to CEOs and to human resources leadership in the hospital and healthcare space, LinkedIn is going to be a good space for that.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Josiah. We've been speaking with Josiah Whitman. He is the CEO of Whitman Partners. We've been talking to him about really everything that they're focused on. They work to place directors of surgical services across the country. They've really become the go-to in that space. And Josiah, I don't know if I would say maybe the best way to describe you is born to recruit, maybe. Clearly, we're talking about someone that knows how to do what he does. He's an expert. He's lived it for over 20 years. And it's great to talk to you, Josiah. Now, I know that it says that you're a tennis and pickleball player, but if you had to choose, which one?
I am an absolute nut for pickleball. It's a wonderful sport, and you're going to see a lot more about it. The professional game is fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. I have friends that have started now and are playing it regularly, are addicted. So there you go. There you
Yes.
go. All right. Well, Josiah, great to have you on the show, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Ben. Take care.